Hi Stampers, it's Lisa with Queen Bee Creations. Welcome to today's live. Today we are working with the More Than Autumn stamp set. This is something that came out last year. It's one of the ones they carried over. And the Splendid Autumn paper, because as we're entering the fall season, I wanted to make use of this gorgeous paper and kind of preserve the scene, because the paper is so pretty all on its own that I didn't want to hide that. I wanted to take advantage of that. So I'm excited to show you how it's done. Okay. So as I said, here is our stamp set. It is actually part of a bundle. Because we're on a Stamping Made Simple Thursday, I'm not using the dies, but for those of you who are more experienced stampers and have a die cutting machine, there's some great dies that go along with this. I always love the ones where they cut out words so you can match those up, especially now that we have the adhesive sheets so we can turn those words into stickers. So super cool. The stamp set goes all the way through Christmas, because there's little gingerbread cookies and we could make hot cocoa and eggnog. I mean, there's some great things out of here. And even if we're not on a holiday, there's little donuts. There's little apples that you could use for any number of things. So think outside the box a little bit. There's more to this set than meets the eye, because there's lots of words involved in several different images. So it's a great bundle. We're going to do a center lift card using the Splendid Autumn paper. So I've got a piece of that. This card is very, very similar to one I've done before. We have it in my book one, the center lift card. When I did the other one, what we did was we cut a piece of paper in half. And then we scored it in half. Oh, and my score blade's missing. And then we came in and we cut off 1.25 inches up to the score line on both sides. Okay, and then we cut off those little tabs. Including the score line. And we got this. Okay, so that gave us our center lift. This time what we're doing is I'm starting out with a piece that is 4.25 by 5.5. Okay, and then I'm going to layer it with a piece that is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. So it's just 1/8 of an inch smaller than the other one. So we got that teeny tiny little border. And then I have this piece here that is about 5 1/8 scored at 1. And I'm going to fold that over the top here. And mine tends to butt right up. Now, the first time I made it, I was a little short, got frustrated, cut it a little too long, and then it was too long. But it was easier for me when it was too long to just come over here and trim off with scissors and take that, 1/16 of an inch off and make it exactly even. So remember, it's always better to cut it too long than too short, because we can always fix things. Okay, and then that's going to glue onto there. So this is how we're getting the center lift this time and why it's a different color. Okay, so you could decorate either one, but I'm going to show you kind of both. So let me grab another piece of paper and we'll do the other one as well. We've got time, right? So we can choose any number of the designs that come with this. There's quite a few very pretty different patterns. Most of them very fall looking. Let's kind of just stay in here. So what I'm going to do is I want this to be, what was 3 1/4? 3 3/4 by 5. Okay. So I know my 5, I'm okay cutting off, you know, a bunch of the trees on this side. Maybe even not so much. Let's go a little less with the yellow. Okay, so now I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to cut off at 5. And I am losing a little bit of the blue over here. But to me, I liked this like scene a little better. And I don't want the whole thing to be sky. So I'm going to go ahead and cut off a little bit of the grass on the bottom. Then I'm going to come this way and do the 3 3/4. Okay, so now I really like the scene I ended up with. And yes, it kind of can sometimes be a little bit of a waste with the skinny little strips we cut off, but I have some fun ways to use up little scraps to make a, you know, a herringbone front. We can glue strips next to each other of a whole bunch of scraps and make a background. And sometimes I even use just these little skinny straps on the inside of a card just to give an accent down the side of the interior. So don't think that I'm really wasting cardstock. I do have ways to use those, but I loved that we can maneuver this around and get the scene that we're looking for out of our designer series paper and be able to use the whole thing and see it. Okay. On this, I want to take and cut 1 inch off of either side. And I want to keep them in order. Okay. So as I lay these down, okay, I have the 2 sets and I want to keep my tops together and my lowers together because we have the 2 cards. See, this should be the right size. I need 5 1/4 by 4 that would go on the inside of this one. And then I'm going to take and adhere these. Oh, I should have gone. That's 4, right? Is this 3 3/4? Yeah, 3 3/4. Oh, this is more than 4. That's why it looks a little funky. Okay. Sorry, I'm just making sure this is the right size. I don't know why it's wonky. Okay. Okay, so 5 1/4 by 4. And then we have our 3 3/4. There we go. That's a better border. That's going to mount on either side here. And then we have this one that can go on the front. And that's going to make everything match up. Okay, so that's one way to do it. The other way is I'm going to adhere this one. Using tear and tape so it's nice and strong. Come on. And then I want to center it. Now, if we're having trouble finding the center, we can always come up here to our 0, oops, on our grid paper. There we go. Okay, and I can find the middle by making it match on either side. So here I'm 1 5/8 and 1 5/8. So my middle is going to be right there. Okay, and then this being 5 1/4, my middle is going to be right there. So now if I match these two things together, oh, I should have gone this way. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to match these two things with my pencil lines. Then I know I'm centered. Okay, does that make sense? I mean, a lot of times I eyeball it, but if you have trouble with that eyeballing thing, then that's how you would find the middle and make sure that you are matching up exactly the way that it needs to. Okay, then we're ready to adhere it to the base. And I'm giving a little extra because it's going to get some tug. Anytime there's a card that, you know, a layer gets pulled on, I'll use more adhesive than normal, but it is very strong stuff. You don't need to use much. Okay, then I can take and layer on my pieces. And goodness, this is not laying out right, is it? Again, I've got too much border. I mean, it's right in that I did a 1/4 inch border, but because I did an 1/8 of an inch border out here, I probably should have done an 1/8 of an inch border here. So we can fix that. See, this is the thing I do when I try to adjust things so that it matches lots of different sizes. Okay, so because this was 4 1/8, I want 4. And that's because this was 5 3/8. And I want 5 1/4. Is that right? Okay, that should give me a tiny border there. And then okay, now this one's going to give me an 1/8 of an inch border. This is 3 1/4, so I want 3 1/8. Okay. So both of these work, but you need to decide if you want the skinny little border like this gives us. That's one option. Okay, but we're making that pattern line up, so we're getting the whole thing. Or we can go back and use that one that has the 1/4 inch border. So, I mean, they will both work. They're both adorable. You decide which one that you want to work with. Okay. I think I'll go with this one so I stay consistent with my skinny borders. And with a skinny border, it's often wise to use liquid glue. Okay, and I've got a little too much glue on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this on here. and use it to lift off some and adhere to these pieces. Because if you use the liquid glue on DSP and it's too much glue, it has a tendency to warp the designer series paper. So be careful with that. I'm also going to be careful to put my flowers right side up. And then this one can go on the front. Okay. So I had the one with the 1/8 inch border and then one with a 1/4 inch border. But I didn't put the 1/4 inch border together. And then this one is just going to go right here in the middle. So this is going to be the layer I'm going to stamp onto when we open up the card. And then I'm going to be using some circle punches to create my focal piece for the front. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now so that we can do our stamping before we adhere. That's always a smart move, especially with the camera running, because that makes things go funky. Yep, that's 2 inch. And I'm going to use 2 1/4. We don't have the 2 1/4 right now, but we do have the 2 3/8, and you will get very similar results. So that will mount on the front, this one. But we want to stamp first. Grab a piece of scrap, sorry. I keep my scraps underneath my glass mat because I need them often and it's a good place to store them. So for my pumpkin pie that I'm going to put on the circle, I wanted that to be a little lighter than normal. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this up and then stamp off onto scrap paper and then stamp onto my circle. And that's just going to give me a much lighter version. So when I color this with the Stampin' blends, the line will start to go away. Okay, you can also stamp it off maybe twice and then stamp it again. I've seen people do that. They call that a no-line watercolor because what you're trying to do is basically have it show up like this. Like it's very super faint where you know where you're coloring, but once you cover it up with your watercoloring or your blends or whatever it is you're doing, you won't see that anymore. So it'll stand out on its own. And then we're going to color that with Stampin' blends. So I'm going to bring in crumb cake for the crust. And then we're going to use pumpkin pie for our pie slice itself. Okay, I'm going to start out with the dark, and I'm just going to accent a little bit. Oh, that one's going a little dry. Let's see what this one's doing. There we go. So this is dark crumb cake. And I'm just putting little accents in, and then I'm going to come back with the light. And we're going to fill in and color right over the top of that dark. So by coloring over the top and like making little small circles, we're going to get it good and wet, which will cause the two colors to blend together. making the dark more of an accent and the light going over the top. That's not going to work. I have not replaced my blends since they came out, and I think it's getting to the point where it's time to replace them. But considering they lasted as long as they did, I'm fairly happy because it's still less expensive than if I was to go out and buy Copics. I realize those are refillable, but I don't do enough coloring to warrant spending that kind of money. Have any of you used Copics before? Okay, I'm going to come in with my dark pumpkin pie, and I'm going to do little flicks. Kind of where I feel the dark would be accented. And then I'm going to come back and go over it with the light. Again, right over the top of the dark, and then extending it out where it blends. And then making little small circles over that area where they overlap. The circular motions kind of just drag the ink around and helps it blend together. Okay, I try not to go super heavy in the middle because I want that to be the lightest section. And then I am applying quite a bit of ink. So when we flip this over, you will notice that it blends all the way through. And that's fine. They're supposed to do that. And then if you wanted to, you could come back in and do a little bit of accenting with a little colored pencil. This is probably a little too dark as I lay this down. But my friend Alyssa Tilsner has a group called, I just dropped the name of it, but it's a Facebook group. Blends and Beyond. That's it. Blends and Beyond is her Facebook group where she gives some excellent tips for coloring, and she does accent quite a bit with colored pencils. Okay, for the interior sentiment, I'm going to go ahead and stamp in Cajun Craze. And that's not really straight, is it? Okay, my words are straight on the block. That's why we do our stamping first, and it's also why paper has two sides. So we can come back and give it a second shot, and now it's perfectly straight. I do see a little bit of an ink smudge. So that's when I would bring in my mono sand eraser, and I can lift that off. Okay. Now in the corner down here, I'm going to stamp a little tiny pumpkin. And for the most part, pumpkins are going to be orange, right? So I'm going to ink this up on Pumpkin Pie ink pad. But I don't know if you noticed, I hovered kind of over the edge, watching so that the stem did not touch the pumpkin pie, because I'm going to come back in with my Stampin' Write markers, and I'm going to color on my stamp using the garden green and give it a green stem. Okay, so this is one of the many techniques that you can do with the Stampin' Write markers, which are actually being discontinued. So If you want to have some markers that you can do lots of great techniques with, you might want to go pick those up, because there are lots of great ideas. And even though Stampin' Up! Has discontinued them, I do have lots and lots of ideas on Pinterest and on my website using them. And one of the ones that I'm often doing is that you can use a water painter, which is not within my fingertip reach, but the water painters are those things that's a little paintbrush that has water in the barrel that you can use for watercoloring. And oftentimes people will want to watercolor, but they may not have every single color like I have. So a way to go around that is to have the Stampin' Write markers, and then you can just scribble on the block and then pick that up with a blender pen or a water painter. So you would just kind of swirl around and pick that up, and then you can watercolor with garden green and then with other colors. So even if you don't have the full set of ink pads, being able to use the marker like this will allow you to watercolor in multiple colors. And you can see the blender pen does an okay job. The water painter definitely does a little better. Oftentimes when I will do this too, I will get the paper good and wet first, and then come back with the ink. And then it's actually going to blender out even better. You can see it just kind of whisks away. So you get a true watercolor look by starting out with water. But anyway, that's off topic. I know I have a tendency to do that. I apologize. Back to our card. I'm going to go ahead and adhere this in the middle. And then we're going to put our focal point on the front. And I'm going to lay this down kind of off to the side because I want to be able to use it to lift with. So it's going to kind of hang over. I can go ahead and erase this. So let's do the two of these together. And then, as I said, I'm going to have it hang over. And then on this one, I added a few of the gold sequins. Now, currently, we don't have gold sequins that are adhesive on the back side, but it's really easy to just make a teeny tiny droplet with your green glue, or even with the, if you have one of the glue presses, they make super tiny little dots, and then you would just set your sequin over the top using the putty end of your take your pick tool, and you can accent it up with some sequins. And that also gives you the flexibility to use them as for shaker cards and all those other things that require stuff that's loose. Okay, for Monday, I have a fun surprise. One of the cards that has been super popular on my Etsy store is the card in a box. And this is a slimline card that meets a card in a box. So this will be the project I do on Monday, because it will fold up flat and fit into a business size number 10 envelope for mailing. And then it's going to pop open for display, giving us this wonderful little scene in our little box. So that will be Monday. So thank you to you, all of you for being here today and hanging out with me. I so appreciate you being here. Make sure that you are checking out the online store today because there are quite a few things that are 10 to 15% off because Stampin' Up! Is having a 15% off sale today only. So go be sure to go and check that out because it's going to end at midnight. Okay. And then watch for my newsletter that will be coming out next week that's going to announce the Holly Jolly um, card class I'm going to do with Diane Evans from Canada. And we will be doing a Zoom like on a better part of a Saturday. I want to say the whole Saturday, but like 10 to 4 on Zoom, working with you guys, and then in a Facebook group doing fun games, prizes, those sorts of things. And I'm really excited about it. So watch out for how to register for the North Pole delivery class because that's going to be coming up, and it's a great way to interact with me on Zoom and then have the videos left over for repeat watching later on. Okay, so thank you so much, and I will see you back here on Monday. Thanks so much. Bye.